When Anita first met Daniel, she wasn't expecting to fall in love with a man who barely had a working phone, let alone a car. But he had something money couldn't buy: sincerity, patience, and a heart that beat like it had been carved to fit hers. He walked her home on rainy days with no umbrella, remembered every detail about her family, and once stayed up all night writing her a poem when she was too anxious to sleep. He was not perfect. He was not rich. But he loved her in a way no man ever had. Anita never believed betrayal could wear lip gloss and laughter. The kind that leaned into your mirror to apply eyeliner, borrowed your clothes without asking, and called you sister like it meant something. But betrayal rarely kicks down the door, it seeps in, like perfume, like praise, like warnings disguised as care. Daniel's first message had been a typo. Instead of, "It was nice seeing you," he'd written, "It was nice saving you." And somehow, Anita believed that's exactly what he had done. They had met at a bus stop on a day Lagos swallowed sunlight and spit out rain. Her phone had died. She had no ride. He offered to walk with her. That walk became a habit. And what grew between them was slow, careful, and gentle, like someone planting roses in a war zone, hoping they would bloom despite the noise. He didn't have a car. Or a working bank app. His phone cracked like old promises and only rang on speaker. But Anita never cared. With Daniel, she laughed deeper. Her shoulders dropped. Her thoughts slowed down. He once waited outside her office in the rain for an hour just to give her roasted plantain wrapped in foil. Another night, when anxiety wouldn't let her sleep, he sent her a handwritten poem through a dispatch rider at midnight. He didn't have much. But what he gave was real. Raw. And hers. Her friends called it village love. Harmless. Cute. Temporary. But Kemi had a different tone. Kemi was the kind of woman who made stilettos sound like judgment. Her words dripped with concern, but behind every smile was a blade. She would nod at Daniel and say, "At least he's trying," then turn to Anita and whisper, "But trying doesn't pay rent." Anita laughed at first. She thought Kemi was joking. Until the jokes kept coming. Like water over stone, soft but relentless. And little by little, Anita began to wear doubt like earrings. Kemi had always been magnetic. The room tilted when she walked in. People listened. Men lingered. Anita used to admire her. But admiration can turn to submission when wrapped in confidence. At first, Kemi only raised eyebrows. Then she asked questions. Then she planted comparisons. Why didn't Daniel ever take her out to dinner? Why was she always paying for boat rides? Was she really building a future with a man who still borrowed data? Anita never answered aloud. But the questions followed her into the shower, into her dreams, into Daniel's arms. There were moments Anita could have fought back. When Daniel surprised her with a notebook filled with their memories, when he fasted for 3 days before her job interview, when he quietly fixed her mother's leaking roof without mentioning it, those were moments she could have chosen him fully. But the noise had grown too loud. Kemi's voice became her second conscience. Even when Daniel kissed her forehead, Anita wondered why it wasn't Paris. Why it wasn't champagne. Why it wasn't more. Love that once felt like enough now felt like settling. And she hated herself for it. One evening, Anita stared at her cracked bathroom mirror and saw two faces. Hers. And Kemi's. Not in reflection, but in choices. She noticed she had started to talk like her, dress like her, think like her. She had bought new heels after Kemi said flats made her look too soft. She had deleted a selfie with Daniel because Kemi said it looked dusty. And that night, when Daniel said he was saving up to get her something meaningful for her birthday, Anita smiled, but the word cheap echoed in her mind. Not from Daniel. From Kemi. The turning point wasn't dramatic. No slaps. No cheating. Just silence. A double date where Daniel couldn't afford dinner. A look from Kemi. A comment over wine. And then, alone in her room, Anita heard the words echo, "You're building a future with a man who can't even afford the present." It was the final nail. Not in Daniel. In her faith. She texted him a long message. Apologizing. Thanking him. Ending it. He called once. Then stopped. When they met days later, he didn't cry. He just looked like someone who had lost something irreplaceable, and knew it. Anita told herself it was for the best. That real love required matching energies, matching incomes, matching ambitions. She deleted their old messages. Hid his hoodie at the back of her wardrobe. Unfollowed him. She went out more. Let Kemi take her shopping. Took photos with men who wore cologne worth her rent. But none of them remembered her brother's name. None remembered her love for ogbono soup. None wrote poems. They only offered things. Not meaning. And when the lights went out in her apartment at night, Anita realized love doesn't always live loudly. Sometimes, it just stops writing. Kemi visited more often now. She brought wine, wigs, gossip, and her perfume. She joked about Daniel, called him her charity case. Anita laughed. But it was empty. Kemi began to suggest new dates, rich friends, corporate mixers. She told Anita her glow was returning, that she looked expensive again. But sometimes, Anita caught her staring at an old photo of her and Daniel that was still inside a dusty frame. Kemi said nothing. Just looked. And smiled a little too long. Like someone admiring a dress on another woman, wondering if it would fit her too. Time passed. Anita got promoted. Her salary doubled. She bought a car. She changed her nails every week and mastered the art of looking unbothered. But on random mornings, she'd see someone who walked like Daniel and feel her heart stutter. She'd dream of him kneeling to tie her shoelace. Or hear a poem on the radio and remember how his words used to stitch her brokenness. She wanted to hate him. Wanted to believe he was just too poor, too slow, too unambitious. But deep inside, she knew he had simply been too real. And she had let real go. Anita began to avoid certain topics with Kemi. When friends asked about Daniel, she shrugged. Said it was just a phase. She wondered if he had moved on. If he still thought about her. She almost called him once, then remembered pride. She almost asked Kemi if she had heard from him, then remembered confusion. Because Kemi no longer rolled her eyes when Daniel's name came up. She just blinked. Smiled. Changed the subject. And for a woman who never ran out of opinions, her silence suddenly felt louder than any words. There were signs. A text Kemi replied to too quickly. A perfume Anita once caught Daniel complimenting now sitting on Kemi's shelf. A photo of a shirt Anita had once bought for Daniel, folded neatly in Kemi's laundry basket during a sleepover. But Anita ignored them. Because if she admitted the truth, it would unravel everything. Their friendship. Her decision. Her trust. So she clung to denial like a warm blanket in winter, afraid that facing reality would mean facing the fact that she had been outplayed by the one person she called sister. One afternoon, while scrolling through Instagram, Anita paused on a post that made her stomach turn. It was a photo of Kemi holding a baby. The caption read, "My whole heart in one photo." The baby had Daniel's eyes. She scrolled down. A wedding picture. Kemi in white. Daniel in a suit. Anita in pieces. Her hands trembled. Her mind raced. She blinked once, twice, hoping it was a dream. But it wasn't. It was a memory-torn knife. She had handed Kemi the map to her treasure, and Kemi had followed it, smiling all the way to the altar. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. The air felt thick. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the ground with a crack. But the real crack had already happened, months ago, when she believed Kemi's voice over her own heart. When she let another woman tell her what her love was worth. Anita curled up on the floor and cried. Not just for Daniel. But for the girl she used to be. The girl who trusted. The girl who believed love didn't need to be branded with price tags. The girl who lost something rare and didn't know it until it wore a ring. But even in heartbreak, clarity arrives like dawn, slow, then sudden. Anita began to remember. The glances. The comments. The night Kemi had insisted on planning that double date. The way she had insisted Anita pay the bill. The smirk afterward. It hadn't been care. It had been strategy. Kemi hadn't wanted to save her from Daniel. She had wanted Daniel for herself. And like a magician, she had distracted Anita with criticism while stealing the very thing she envied. Not because Daniel wasn't good enough, but because he was the only one who truly saw what enough looked like. The hours after Anita saw the wedding photo passed in fragments. Like broken glass glinting under the sun. She lay on the floor, surrounded by silence, unable to remember when she had last felt real. It wasn't the loss of Daniel that shattered her. It was the realization that Kemi had never been her friend. Every shared laugh, every hug, every "I've got you" was now soaked in betrayal. Kemi hadn't just stolen her man. She had studied Anita's heartbeat, memorized the rhythm, and then played it like a thief tapping a code into a safe. The baby in the picture haunted her. The small hands, the familiar eyes, the joy Anita should have known. It wasn't just a child. It was a final exclamation mark. Proof that the life Anita could have had was now claimed, wrapped in white lace and secrets. She stared at that photo longer than she should have. Not out of envy, but grief. The grief of lost timelines. Alternate realities. Of love sabotaged by the very person who used to help her choose outfits for dates with Daniel. It was emotional treason, and Anita was the last to know. Memories swarmed her like mosquitoes at night. She remembered the day she and Daniel sat by the lagoon, talking about baby names. How he had said if he ever had a son, he'd want the boy to be kind before clever. Let the world call him soft, he said. But let him have the kind of soul that can never be bought. Anita had smiled then. Now she wondered if that boy, Daniel's son, was being raised by a woman who never valued that kind of soul to begin with. For days, Anita didn't eat properly. Didn't answer calls. Friends messaged, checked in, tagged her in memes to lighten her mood. But her laughter had vanished somewhere between her heart and her throat. She tried to tell herself it wasn't her fault. That Daniel had made a choice. That Kemi had fooled them both. But a deeper voice inside whispered something crueler. That she had been warned. Not by Kemi, but by her own heart. The unease. The guilt. The gut tugs she'd ignored. In the end, she hadn't been deceived. She had been distracted. Eventually, Anita opened Facebook again. She scrolled further down Kemi's page with trembling hands. Another photo. This one taken during her birthday party last year. Daniel was in the corner of the frame, carrying balloons. Kemi was staring at him, not at the balloons. Anita zoomed in. She hadn't noticed it before, but Kemi's gaze had always lingered. Like someone watching a house they planned to rob. The party where Daniel had given her a tiny wooden box, handcrafted and filled with handwritten notes, was the same day Kemi said, "It's giving broke energy." And Anita had believed her. The timeline didn't lie. Kemi and Daniel had gotten married just 6 months after the breakup. The baby looked no older than 4 months. Which meant the overlap was too tight to ignore. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't healing. It was conquest. Anita searched her chat history. Found old voice notes. The day she broke up with Daniel, Kemi had sent her cake. The caption read, "Freedom tastes sweet." Anita had thought it was sisterly support. Now she saw it for what it was, a victory feast. Still, one part of her refused to accept it. Maybe Daniel had just moved on. Maybe he had been hurting too. Maybe he didn't know Kemi had poisoned things. But then came the final cut. An old folder on her laptop titled "Us." Inside were photos from their first beach date. One in particular, Daniel smiling, face sunlit, eyes soft. Behind him, barely noticeable, was Kemi. She hadn't been invited. But there she was in the background, walking alone, watching. Watching Anita smile. Watching Daniel laugh. Like a ghost haunting a story she wanted to rewrite. Anita closed the laptop. Her hands shook. Her chest tightened. This wasn't heartbreak, it was spiritual vandalism. Kemi hadn't just taken her man. She had invaded her memories. Edited herself into the very roots of a relationship she once claimed to disapprove of. There were no signs of guilt. No signs of shame. Only filtered photos, captions about finding love in unexpected places, and a woman who wore another woman's dreams like designer gowns. Anita wanted to scream, but all she could do was sit in the silence and unravel. In the following weeks, Anita moved through life like a ghost in her own body. Her apartment felt colder. Her clothes lost color. Food tasted like dust. She showed up to work, smiled at meetings, even got a raise, but it all felt like background noise to a betrayal still echoing inside her bones. The woman who had once helped her fix her brows before dates now walked through Anita's old life like a thief wearing her shoes. There was no confrontation. No closure. Just absence where a sister used to be. Then one Sunday afternoon, Anita received a message. It was a mutual friend, Tina. The message read, "Have you seen Kemi's recent post?" "I'm confused." Anita's heart skipped. She opened Instagram. A reel was playing. Kemi in a hospital waiting room, face weary, eyes red. The caption, "Pray for Daniel. Life is fragile." Anita froze. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Daniel. What happened? She clicked. More posts. Harsh prayers. Comments full of "Stay strong." A car accident. Internal bleeding. Emergency surgery. No details. Just a community of people grieving what hadn't yet died. Panic clawed through her chest. She shouldn't care. She shouldn't. But the idea of Daniel lying somewhere between life and death ignited a wildfire inside her. Memories swirled. Him holding her hand at the dentist. Him rubbing her back when her cramps felt like knives. Him whispering, "I'm not going anywhere." But now he might be. And she couldn't do a damn thing. She had lost the right to stand by him. Lost the right to call. Lost everything but the ache. For 2 nights, Anita didn't sleep. She watched for updates like weather reports. Then, a photo surfaced, Daniel in a hospital bed, unconscious. Kemi beside him, holding his hand, her forehead pressed against it. Anita stared at the image for a long time. It didn't look like love. It looked like guilt. Like someone praying not for recovery, but for time. A second chance. Anita didn't cry. Not yet. She waited for news like someone waiting for a verdict. A sentence. A moment that would decide if she could finally let go, or if the pain would sharpen into something permanent. 3 days later, Kemi posted a smiling photo. Daniel was awake. Holding their baby. The caption, "He's back. God is faithful." Anita exhaled, a sharp, painful, grateful. Then she cried. Finally. Not because she wanted him back. But because somewhere in her chest, a door had shut. Quietly. Completely. She wept for what she had lost, for what she never had, for what she once believed would last forever. Daniel had returned, but not to her. And in that final separation, Anita found a strange peace. A heartbreak shaped like relief. Weeks passed. Life, stubborn and indifferent, moved on. Anita took a solo trip to Ghana. She bought a journal. Began writing again. Not about love. But about patterns. Red flags. The silence between words. She reflected on how many times she had laughed at things that hurt her. How often she'd ignored the feeling in her stomach when Kemi laughed a little too loudly at Daniel's jokes. Healing didn't come in a wave. It came in fragments. In tiny truths. In learning to trust her own voice again. One evening, while sitting by a lagoon alone, Anita remembered the last poem Daniel had ever written for her. She no longer had the paper, but the words had tattooed themselves onto her memory. It ended with, "Even if I'm not the story you tell your children, I hope I was the chapter that made you believe in softness." Anita smiled. Maybe Daniel was never meant to stay. Maybe he was the lesson. Maybe softness was what she needed to reclaim. And maybe forgiveness wasn't for Kemi, it was for the part of herself that once stayed silent. She never reached out. Never called. Never liked a single post. But one day, Anita bumped into an old classmate who mentioned that Kemi and Daniel were trying to make things work but looked exhausted. Apparently, Daniel had lost weight. Kemi looked different, tired, short-tempered. Anita said nothing. Just nodded. And as she walked away, she realized that not all wins feel like victory. Some come with shadows. With death. With ghosts in your bedroom whispering names you stole. And perhaps, just perhaps, Kemi had gotten what she wanted, but not what she needed. In a quiet moment weeks later, Anita packed up a box. Inside it, old letters, a scarf Daniel once left, a photo from a birthday years ago. She drove to a charity center and handed it over. Not because she wanted to forget. But because she finally could. She had learned to grieve while standing. To bleed without broadcasting. To lose and still remain whole. Kemi had taken a man. But she could never take what Anita had become because of him. The woman who now knew her own worth, not in price tags, but in peace. Anita's new life was simple. She took long walks. Read novels. Let her phone ring unanswered sometimes. She made peace with not getting closure from others, and instead gave it to herself. The scars remained, yes. But scars are only proof that the wound closed. That she survived. That she had been loved, betrayed, and reborn. And one day, she wrote something on a small sticky note and placed it on her mirror. Never let another woman hold the pen when you're writing your own story. She looked at it each morning like armor. The city didn't change. The restaurant still played the same music. The buses still honked too loud. But Anita had changed. She no longer flinched at photos. No longer measured her joy through someone else's lens. Love, she knew now, didn't have to look grand. It just had to be honest. And the next time someone asked her why she was single, she smiled and said, "Because I'm waiting for a love I don't have to explain away." And in that moment, she wasn't healing anymore. She was healed.